today we got a exciting topic for you. The last time we had Kevin Boast on, the question came up, what's the best way to kind of fix mistakes that you made, work on the history, kind of not make that topic so scary. So today we're going to dive into that. So we're happy to have Kevin back with us. He is a GitKraken ambassador, a longtime power user of the product. So he is a wealth of knowledge there. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to him, and he can take us through what he has to present.
Cool. Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate it. Welcome back, everyone. Kind of by popular demand. Sort of like I did last time for those people who weren't here. I'm perfectly happy. There's going to be some time towards the end for a little bit of Q&A, but if you want to drop stuff in the chat as we're going along, I will try to take things as we go. I may have to kind of push things around a little just for time constraints, but we will see how it goes. I will also do my best to avoid too many Halloween puns and jokes. That way there's not a lot of face palming all the way through. Great. Thank you, Gavin. I appreciate the sound check. For anybody who's looking to follow me, I do live streaming and coding on Twitch and YouTube. Links in the chat if you want to follow along. But today we are going to dive in. I've got a repo open here in front of me. This is an open source project that I am a contributor on. It's just a cross-platform installer framework, but the repo itself doesn't matter that much. What we're actually interested in today is figuring out how to go through and deal with mistakes, because unfortunately, maybe some of you are better than me, I make mistakes, especially in my development. Usually, quite often, I discover the mistake somewhere between clicking the push button and the pipeline running, and I go, ah, crap. And now it's time to go through and actually try to figure out what is the best way to go through and do this. So we're going to kind of look at this in several stages. So I have created a local branch here, GK/demo, which GitKraken renders these as a hierarchy with directories. And then in the interest of just getting some data to work with, I'm going to just cherry pick a commit so that we can kind of pretend like, hey, this is some work that I've already started in on and that we're going to be looking at playing with. Now, the first thing to know about is, I won't claim to always do this, but it is a good idea to start reviewing your changes. The easiest time to correct things is as early in the process as possible. We'll see as we get further down the path that things get a little more difficult to change the further that you go. So if we just go through and pick on one of these things here, the first thing that I want to point out are these three little buttons right up here. These are your different diff views that you have. So we've got split, inline, and hunk. And the key thing about these, like, it's nice that you have these big obvious buttons, but oftentimes you want to get down to something a little more simplistic. Like you're going through a change that you made and you realize, oh, shoot, I left that debugging line in my changes. Now you can flip back to your IDE of choice or whatever you were using to edit the files and correct it there. But we're already in GitKraken. We've already got this. And one of the easiest ones is this individual stage or discard line so that you can actually bring over individual changes from a file. So you see that I staged just one line of that prior thing. That one comes over. I can also go through and unstage it and move back and forth between these two situations where I am just grabbing parts of it. It is worth noting that what options are available to you does change based upon which of these diff modes that you are looking at. So if you are looking for a stage line or stage selection, you will see something slightly different depending on which one of these that you are actually looking at. The next thing to know about, and this one often happens, is you have some files, maybe some config files or similar, that you've modified to maybe point at a local environment or something that you're working on, and you realize, I don't actually want those as part of my commit. One of the coolest things that you can quickly do from right here is you can just immediately stash. So we've got stage as an option here, right? But down on this extra option, we actually have stash as a secondary option as well. So a quick, easy way to say, you know what? I'm going to stash these two files. The other thing that's not always immediately apparent is this commit summary down here is actually tied to this little box right up here. And you can type in either of them, but my saved stuff, right? So if I'm going to go through and type here, you can see that it's updated in both places. I can immediately just stash some files. I end up with a stash, and now I'm back to being able to go through and pick up whatever changes that I want to build up on my commit as well. Simple, easy. Now we're going to get into some of the more interesting stuff. One of the things that I do want to point out to people, if you are unaware of it, this learn.gitkraken.com, this is an absolutely amazing resource for getting some really good fundamentals of how Git works. I'm going to kind of skim over that and assume that most people here have at least got some of the basics: Git, commit, push, pull, etc. But if some of those things are a little unfamiliar to you, I highly recommend it. It does use GitKraken to kind of show the tree, but a lot of it is actually focused around CLI interactions and understanding how the underlying Git database works, so that you can kind of have a better idea. A lot of this gets simpler the more you understand about it, like with most things. Okay, we're going to end up throwing some stuff away. Clear there. Trash can. Undo, undo, undo. Throwing things away is easy. And with Git, it's very easy. First thing to know about before we start getting really fancy, make backup pointers. So what I mean by that is when you start realizing that you're going to move commits around, this is kind of like pruning a tree, where we're going to be maybe cutting some branches off, maybe grafting some stuff together. The problem is it's very easy to accidentally cut off the branch that you're sitting on. That's not good. We don't like to fall out of trees. The easiest way to do this is it's like, okay, we know we want to manipulate something about this extra branch. So specifically, I've got these two commits here. One where I updated a sign tool exe, and then I ended up going, shoot, don't need that. I'm going to revert it. Now, I could leave this together. The PR is going to squash when it merges. But it's like, I'd much rather leave a nice, clean looking set of commits for the reviewer to be able to have a better idea of what is actually in here. So it would be really great if I could drop these two commits out of this branch. Now, before we get carried away, right click, create branch, back up. There we go. Just in the event anything goes wrong, I now have a pointer at that commit that's going to be able to get me back. Because what would ultimately end up happening, and I'm just going to hide the remote here for a moment, so we're only looking at local branches, is if I were to take this, and I'm going to just delete my local pointer. If I were to take this backup branch and say reset back to here, what ends up happening is I've now just lost some commits. They've disappeared from my tree, and this is the point where most people go, oh shoot, what has gone wrong? Where have I lost all of my data? The secret trick here, and this is one thing to keep an eye on, is this little undo button, right? It doesn't work in all situations. It can't undo all actions, but it can undo a bunch of them. And the first thing to be aware of is you can just say, oops, give me that back, right? I didn't mean to do that. Please just go back to where I was. That's what I am looking to do. So before you panic, check for your undo button. Again, not a catch-all solution. The other thing to be aware of, depending on your IDE of choice, when you're moving stuff around like this, Git is shifting these files quite a bit. If you have an IDE that's like watching file changes, shut it down. Oftentimes you'll run into file conflicts, and this is especially true on Windows, where something gets locked. Just shut down the IDE when you're doing these kind of bigger changes. The other thing that I want to point out, and I'm going to reset this one back to here, is there is a wonderful command built into Git called git reflog. Now, reflog is an alias underneath the git log, and I won't dive too deeply into it. But if we go reflog show, and then we'll look at the backup branch, we can actually see a bit of a history of where this branch pointer was pointed at. This can be very helpful when it's that you were on a commit prior, but now it's effectively lost to the ages. The key thing that you want to note is over here, these little commit hashes. These are the points that you can go back to. If we were to look and see the commit hashes up here, like the one that we are on, this shows that hash, that matches that one there. You'll note this shows this is where the head of backup is currently located, which is good. These numbers align, or at least get close. I guess I've got the wrong one somewhere. No, this one has an extra couple digits because it ends on CA, and this one stops at C1. But if we realize, oh, okay, we want to actually go backwards, one of the things that you can end up doing is saying, well, now that I've got the hash, I can actually just say git checkout, and then we can grab one of the prior hashes and say, check out that branch. Oh, except for you have to spell it correctly, otherwise it doesn't work. And you'll note in this case what it has done, and this will be my Halloween joke, we've gone headless horseman and we've now got a detached head. But it gives us a way of jumping to that commit and saying, oh, okay, this is this the place where I wanted to be? I think it is, but sometimes the reflog looks scary. It's got weird text in it. Maybe it's not quite what I expect. There's a lot of rich syntax here on the Git log that I won't dive into, with some really cool stuff that you can say of, hey, show me where I was yesterday, that kind of stuff. Check out the Git log documentation for a lot more details on that. But finally, if we say, oh, yes, this is in fact where we want, check out, and then we're going to do capital B, back up, and then we'll put our hash back in again. And you'll note now our backup branch has moved to that same commit. We're no longer on a headless branch, and we're off to the races. So in the event that something goes catastrophically wrong, Git reflog can be your best friend if it's a set of commits that you had at some point, right? It is a great way to be able to effectively undo and get yourself back into that working state. Okay, so now that we've got that going, we'll go ahead and flick the remote stuff back on. Let's go to the idea of, I've got this signing branch and I want to get rid of these two commits out of the middle of it. Right. So one of the ways that we can go through and do this is we'll create a new branch here. And actually, I think I've got a GK demo one right here. We'll just use that. And what we can do is we can do it somewhat manually. If we go one by one, we can individually cherry pick commits across. And you'll note when you execute a cherry commit, I kind of skimmed over this before, it gives you the option of immediately commit the changes or leave them as pending so that you can maybe make some modifications. In this case, we're just going to take everything that we want. We're going to skip the ones that we don't want and say, you know what, let's go ahead and grab these ones here. Now, unfortunately, there isn't a cherry commit string of commits. Unfortunately, that ends up not being a thing that we have. So we end up having to go and individually cherry commit or cherry pick each of these commits one at a time all the way across. Totally doable, brings all of the commits across. The key thing to note here is this commit hash here. And if I look at this one up here, these are not the same. Right? When you are cherry picking, this is giving you a brand new set of commits. This is oftentimes when people talk about rewriting Git history, this is what it means. When your commit hash is changing, you are making a brand new commit, and therefore history is different. When you have new commits with new hashes and you are moving existing branches around, this is where you get into a situation where the remote is going to want you to force push. Effectively, your remote, like we'll imagine GitHub in this case, when you go to push changes, as long as those changes are just walking history forward from existing points, very okay, right? That's from Git's perspective, that makes sense. History goes forward linearly. That is how, history books get written. That makes sense. The moment we say, you know what, I'd like to go back in time and change something, now we get into some weird sci-fi situations where it's like, oh, we're rewriting history. Is this really what you wanted to do? Right? Like so many cases, we got to be careful that we don't mess up the timeline. But it does allow you to say, yes, let's go ahead and force push. Let's make those changes. So when you say force push, effectively what you are doing is saying, I don't care where the remote commit thinks it should be. Copy my local one and push it up. That is where we want to end up being. Yeah, and Jason's comment about Git itself supports the multiple ones. Yes, there is a feedback.gitkraken.com that is a great resource for a lot of those features. There's the Git CLI has significantly more features than what you will find in, I think, any GUI. Like the amount of stuff that there is impressive. But yes, definitely feel free to drop those feature requests in. There may be one out there for it. I had a colleague that wanted a similar thing not too long ago. But it is worth doing. Let's back this guy up here. The other thing that I'm very kind of quickly doing and skimming over is this concept of reset. The reset command is very convenient for moving branch pointers around. So I am on my GK demo branch, and when I do reset hard, what that is doing is it's telling Git, I don't care what you think. Pick this branch pointer up and put it right here, darn it. Don't do anything fancy, right? The other option that I can do, and this sometimes gets to be very interesting because you can see I've got 2 commits here. If I do reset mixed, what this does is it keeps my working copy, but resets the index. So the key terminology here to understand, index is just where my branch is pointed. That's Git's way of keeping track of where things are going. But keep working copy means leave the files in their currently modified state. So if I do reset mixed, what this ends up with is now I've got pending changes that look just like those 2 commits that were there, but now they're sitting here pending, and I can go through and start manipulating those as I see fit, which can be really handy at times, right? The other thing that we can end up doing is we can do something called, let's just throw those away. We can end up doing a rebase. Now there is, and I'm gonna drop a link out here as well in the chat for people who are interested in. There is long-standing debates between the idea of Git merges versus Git rebates and which rebases and which one is better. Being able to go back and pick between them often depends on your workflow and how your team has decided that they want to go through and work. I tend to be a rebase guy myself, so I'm very much skewed in that perspective, but I am aware that oftentimes merge commits, like especially when people have a feature branch that they're working on, you know, their main branch is advanced past them. They oftentimes go, well, shoot, my main branch has moved past me. I want to be able to go through and ingest those types of changes. Great, but it does mean that there's now some ways that you have to decide to do it. Merge commit usually feels more natural to people. Rebase means it's nice linear, and as you can see, I like clean linear history. I'm going to go view all files real quick, and I am just for the purposes of fun here, we're just going to go through and open in VS Code real quick, and I'm just going to, for no other reason, do that so that I have some amount of changes to play with, and then we are going to just flip onto the develop branch, and we are going to just example. I probably should have warned my colleague that I was about to do this. Didn't warn him. This would be fun. Okay, so on this signing branch, we've got a situation where our target branch has advanced past this, and we want to be able to bring these changes over. And more importantly, we want to clean this up. So one of my favorite tricks to do here is if you drag and drop your branch onto your target, this will give you an option for merge, rebase, or interactive rebase. So if you're merging back from your head branch, oftentimes you'll drag the other direction. So you'll drag develop onto your feature branch and then do the merge that way. But in this case, like we could do a rebase, which is what I do when I'm feeling like going quick. But the more powerful one is this interactive rebase. So what this has now done is it's taken every single one of the commits that I had on my signing branch and said, okay, what do you want to do with these? And under each of these, you generally want to process them bottom up, because then you're at least going in chronological order. And that's how my brain thinks. I like to think of my changes in the order that I made them. And we can decide whether we want to include them, which is pick, reword, or drop. And reword is just update the message, because quite often as I'm making changes, I'm going to type like really lazy commit messages, because it's like I use my commits as save points. And I don't type out a nice long description at a save point. That's something I do when I'm ready to open a PR. But we realize these two here are the one that we actually want to get rid of. So we can actually go through here and elect to drop these two commits here and say, you know what? We're not going to include these anymore. This is not something we want to do. And these commits here, like you can see here, this is just a work in progress. And it took 4 commits before I actually got everything all the way working. So what we can actually do here is we can say, well, what if we just squash all of these guys together? So we're going to drop the top commit, squash the 4 middle ones together, drop this one, and then we'll keep this one here because this was from another contributor and we want to give people credit where credit is due. So we're not going to be able to go through and do it. And we can see that here we've got the nice little arrows that kind of indicate, hey, this is all being squashed into this guy, which is great. And you'll note it also defaulted this one here to being able to reword the individual commit. So in this case, we come in here and we go, oh, okay, rather than doing this, what we're going to change this up to is implemented. Oh, except for you should really pick on the right word and not whatever keystrokes I just hit to be able to do this, to be able to bring this guy across. And then if we hit start rebase, we can see what we end up with, right? From this whole path here, we now end up with, and I'm going to turn off view all files because that's annoying me. We end up with the one commit from the initial contributor, Matthias, and then all of my commits are squashed. And the change here that was the sign tool exe was in the vendor directory. And we can see there are no vendor directory changes anymore. We've actually brought things across. Now, this entire rebase operation, you can end up doing very manually yourself as well, right? We can come in here. We could end up saying, okay, I'm going to highlight these commits. I'm going to, if we actually get onto a branch that has them, I'm actually going to end up moving my branch pointer around, squashing these commits and cherry picking them across. You can do those operations manually. Cherry pick, reset, all of those are just the small individual pieces that you often end up getting in a rebase as it's being able to push things across. But it is something that you could do one step at a time. And occasionally you get into that situation where it's like, well, the tool's not going to quite do what I wanted. I want to do a rebase, but I want to stop after 3 commits because I want to edit this thing. And then I want to replay a few more. Yeah, at that point, you are probably getting into a situation where you're going to end up doing it. The last one that I like to show off in terms of doing is sometimes the easiest thing to do, especially when you have a long string of commits that you know are going to be conflicts, is just switch onto here and then squash the commits as you go, right? And then do the rebase. Because oftentimes squashing means that you don't have to deal with each replayed commit one at a time. You can just deal with the sum total, which is what most people think of when they're getting ready to do a PR. There's a sum total of changes, not an individual set of commits. Okay, sorry, I've been ignoring chat for a moment. Is interactive rebase only available on Windows? Can't see it on Linux. I might need to check. So interactive rebase, as far as I'm aware, there should be a limitation on platform. GitKraken, I believe, is an Electron-based, and so the code should be there for all of them. Rebase doesn't show up if you are in a situation where the branch that you're targeting is already behind you in history. So if you aren't seeing the rebase, make sure that you are on the right, make sure you're on the branch that you want to rebase, drag onto the new branch that you want to rebase onto, and then it should show up there to be able to do it. Yeah, Jason's comment there is exactly right. Available on all OSs, but may not be available depending on where you're at. Usually what I find that ends up biting me, like, for example, if I jump over here to this one, hey, go away. Why? I don't know what I've hovered on to make this come up. There we go. For example, if I try to drag my KDB signing onto develop here, oh, it is going to pick it up. Where there is a situation, depending on where you're selected, where it's not possible to rebase based upon where you're at. And that might be an interesting one to be able to go through and check. Okay, with that, I hope that was helpful for people to kind of go through and do this. Again, key things to remember: Git reflog exists. I don't usually tell people to memorize the syntax. Just know it's there and that you can go and pull the docs when you need it, because that's what you are really looking for. Leverage cherry pick and reset to just move your branch pointers around. Please, please, please make backup branches just so that you've got references and effectively kind of things holding those pointers in place for when you need them. Yeah. Let's see. So you can only use interactive rebase if the dev has advanced past your feature. What would you do if it wasn't? It's not just if you can't interact with the feature. I'm trying to remember the failure case where it doesn't pull back and forth. There is a limit where if there isn't a common base, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it is because I've gotten myself into this situation where I've, let's see here. If I go down here, and now it's being very helpful and just showing up everywhere. And I might have to double check. Larry, if you want to, feel free to shoot me a message if you are able. I don't know if the repo is private or similar. At least just seeing the relationship between the branches, and I can see about following up there.
Kevin, there's a couple of other Q&As
perfect.
in the last couple of minutes we can get to. For those that are asking about recording, yep, all these are recorded, and you can go to gitkraken.com/workshops to watch any of the past workshops, or on our YouTube channel. There's a playlist there as well. So let's throw a couple of these on.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah. So the difference between git reset mixed and git reset soft. So that's a great question here. So down in this situation, soft ends up, I should say, I don't remember. Soft is not an option that I end up using most of the time during my workflow. Usually when we talk about git reset soft, it still pulls it back, and you end up basically in the same situation as mixed in most cases. I honestly might have to go check the docs on there to remember what the subtle differences are. In general, mixed is what I want in nearly all situations. But would any of these situations be handled differently if your commits or branches already had been pushed to the remote? Yes. Yeah. The big difference when we talk about commits that are pushed to the remotes is whether you're going to have to rewrite history or not. So the basic flow is get your local branches in the state that you want them to be in, and then push. If you're on the command line, you'll have to do a -F for force. If you're in GitKraken, there's the big scary red button that comes up that says yes, force push. So when you are rewriting history, it will make you do that force. You will be limited depending on the repo that you're going to. People have branch protections on things like their main branch because they don't want people rewriting history. That's scary. So just be aware that on those situations, you may either have to go and find somebody to help. And it's usually rare that you try to force push onto main. Usually it's a side branch that you're getting set up for a pull request in, if it's protected at least. It's a bit more unusual situation if you end up going there. Let's see. Is interactive rebase feasible through the CLI, or is that facilitated only through the GUI? Yeah, so the CLI does have kind of the same concept of the rebase option available to you, where it is going to give you the option of walking through the commits and squashing them, picking them, or dropping them effectively as you go through and do. I believe the options under git rebase -- help will kind of walk you through what that ends up looking like. I favor the GUI myself. I know that the CLI options are there, and I usually find myself in the docs or in the GitKraken terminal with its extra help for to be able to find when I am looking for extra stuff inside of here. Let's see. I was in the middle of a rebase a while ago and had to step away, came back and started making a bunch of changes a bit before I realized, trying to find that one in the history so that I can grab it and answer it. Ken, do you have the remaining bit of that? I'm trying to remember it. There it is. Before I realized that it was a mess and had to clear all that up. Yeah, so in those situations where you realize that you're making a bunch of changes, what I would probably advocate for is stashing your current changes. A stash kind of functions like a normal commit, but you can still pull it back later. It sort of depends on what changes you've made and how many future commits in that rebase are going to touch those exact same files. Ideally, everything's disjointed and there's no conflicts whatsoever, but you can certainly get yourself into a situation if you're in the middle of a rebase and you haven't finished going through it and you've got changes. Like I said, I'd stash the changes first, finish the rebase, and then stash pop to pull them back would probably be the easy way to go through and do it. Is there a way to remove white space when fixing merge conflicts? I only see the button available when making commits. Oh, that is a good question. So I believe this is referring to when looking at the diff on one of these guys here. This little button up here in the corner for hide white space changes. I don't have an easy conflict to go through and do. I don't know if it's there on the merge conflicts because you kind of want to see all changes, and if it is going to be a white space related thing, that is a good one that I might have to go back and look. And now that you say it, I am realizing that I don't remember seeing it inside of the conflict screen. So that might be something I have to go back and double check on. Is there a practical limit on the number of commits which can be referenced in the interactive rebase? Not that I've run into. The worst I've seen is something like 80. That's a lot. And that was like a long running branch that probably should have been merged a long time before that ended up having to go through, and it was a miserable nightmare. So there's probably a cognitive limit before a practical limit that you run into where it becomes a little more difficult. Oftentimes when things get big like that, I'm going to be looking to start squashing a bunch of commits together just to cut down on my cognitive load of what I'm doing. Even if my first rebase is just to get things squashed together, that's probably what I'm looking to do just to get it cleaned up, especially for somebody who has to review it. Some reviewers like to go commit by commit. And so make it nice for them.
I think we got through all the Q&A. Someone asked if you could demo the stash pop. I know we're out of time, but I don't know if you can do that real quickly.
Yeah. So if we take something like this, right? So I'm going to pop this guy here. If we go through here and let's see, I'm trying to see how I get myself halfway through a rebase and then get myself stuck. So we're going to go here, and I think, well, actually, I guess we don't even need to do that. A simple reset with a mix. So the easy guy here is up with the stash, and usually my work in progress, right? Stash, give it a name. That way it's named. And then if we go through and finish the rebase, right? So we'll functionally fast forward our way through. You'll note our stash is now still sitting halfway through where we were at. But then you have the ability, either the pop button here. You also have stashes down on the left where you can grab individual ones, or I often will just right click, and you can either pop the item off the stash or just hit apply stash. The difference being your stash is a stack of things that you've saved, and whether you want to pop it off the stack or just copy it across. And in this case, it's going to come across cleanly because it is the set of same changes, but it would end up looking something similar to that. And again, if I didn't get to anybody's questions, my link should have been chat at the beginning, keboo.dev. Feel free to reach out. Always love discussing GitKraken with folks.
Thank you, Kevin. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Thanks for your questions. If for some reason we missed your question, I'll definitely go back through, take a look, and get Kevin to take a look at it, and we'll get back to you. Perfect. So thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks all.